the band had just released the Ghost of Orion earlier this year, which of course came through, amazing reviews. Everybody's saying how fantastic it is. And now you also have a new EP, Macabre Cabaret, coming out just 8 months after that. Did y'all still have some fire, that you still felt like in the writing process?
No, the EP songs were recorded at the same time as the album because Nuclear Blast, they said, give us more music than is required so we can release something later on.
Okay.
So we recorded 11 pieces of music. And then obviously, as a band, we couldn't decide which songs should be held for the EP. We wanted them all on the album. So we let Nuclear Blast decide which 3 songs they wanted for the EP. Oh. So they picked the songs, and the album was released. And then, a couple of months went by, and they said, shall we start putting the EP together? So our engineer, Mark Minot, he took the 3 songs and he's given them a slightly different sound so that they have a standalone feel rather than sound like they're from the album. And brand new artwork by Roberto Bordin. And it's looking good. There's been a lot of feedback. The record label have told me that pre-sales have gone so well they're having to repress the record already, and it's not even out, which is really good news. You don't normally get that sort of a high.
Yeah.
So yeah, they were from the same recording session. It's not like we've gone into the studio and done something new, but obviously they're still new and fresh to everybody else.
Right.
And as I say, Mark, the engineer, has given them a tweak so they don't sound like they came from the album.
Yeah. It does, of course, sound similar, but it also sounds. The audio does sound a little bit differently compared to the Ghost of Orion.
Yeah, well, when Mark told me, I don't have engineer's ears. So when Mark told me, he sent me the 3 songs, and I listened to them, and I thought, yeah, great. And then he rang me about an hour later, and he said, what did you think? And I said, yeah, they're great. And he said, but what did you think about the changes I made? And I'm just thinking... I couldn't hear it. My ears aren't tuned the same way his ears are tuned.
Right.
And he was like, I made loads of changes. And I said, all right, well, it sounds great. So whatever you did was fantastic. Thank you very much.
Right. Just keep doing that.
Yeah. I don't know what he did, but he said he did a lot. So I believe him.
Yeah, for sure. One thing that, I wanted to... Hopefully it's not too personal, but, I wanted to say I hope your daughter is doing way much better than she had been, and she's on a excellent road to recovery. I'm glad she did great.
She's doing really well now, actually. Yeah, she's able to walk again, and her hair's coming back. So she's doing great. She's back at school, and there's a couple of side effects from going through chemo and radiotherapy and 2 massive operations, but she's, for the most part, she's not back to normal. Don't suppose she ever will be, but she's doing really well, and we're very happy with the way that things have gone for us.
Oh, good. I'm very happy for that. I mean, that's something that you wouldn't wish on anybody, and I'm just glad that everything worked out.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. So
still eating my dinner at the moment. I do apologize.
No, that's fine. Yeah. Either way, I was just thinking about that too, because it may, for a lot of people, 5, 6 p.m. sometimes is dinner time, and I was just thinking about that before we're gonna have our conversation.
Well, I was running late here. I would normally have my dinner about 5:30. Me and the little one, and ready for 6. But I doubt something went wrong, and I was running behind. So I've had half of it. I'm just nibbling the rest.
Yeah. Now, for yourself, now that the Ghost of Orion has already been out for 8 months, and you've had some time to kind of mull it over and kind of consume it, how do you, now that it's been out for a bit, how are you feeling about that album?
Well, I haven't listened to it yet.
Oh, okay.
I don't really feel in the mood to listen to it because it was such a tough time in the studio, and I'd only just emerged from this terrible shadow that we've been living under.
Yeah.
And so the album for me is always going to have this shaded feel and look to it. Obviously, I've heard the songs because when we record them, Mark does his producer engineer magic, and he emails them to us. So I have a folder on my PC which contains all the songs. They're not in any order, and they're straight from the studio. And so I listen to them, one at a time when they arrive. And yeah, that one sounds great. A week later, 2 weeks later, the next one comes. That's great. Yep. And then you'll get a song you've already had before where Mark's tweaked it a little bit further. So I end up with a folder filled with, 3 or 4 versions of every song. But I've never heard the CD.
Okay.
So obviously I'm aware of the music, obviously, but I don't know what the CD sounds like from start to finish.
Yeah.
I'll listen to it one day. I just don't need to listen to it just now.
Right. Yeah. I'm sure that was a lot to kind of get off your chest at that point.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, God, when I went into the studio, historically, I'll get the vocals done in sort of 10 or 15 days. The vocals took a year to record for this album because I just wasn't, I thought I was ready and I wasn't ready, and I had to rewrite stuff and re-record stuff and then throw stuff away and start all over again. And it was a nightmare. It was a nightmare. But, with the help of Andrew and Mark, we got through it. They told me, we know you can sing these particular notes because you've sung them in the past. You just, for want of a better phrase, you're just not trying hard enough. So I tried harder, and eventually we achieved our goal. But it was really tough. It was really, really tough. And so when the recording had finished, rather than, high-five each other and go, yeah, that was brilliant, and open a bottle of champagne, I just walked out of the studio and went home and just carried on with my life as normal. There was no celebration at all. It was just such a tough ordeal. I'm sure I'll come to love the album one day. Yeah. Probably.
And it's time.
Yeah, when it's time.
Yeah. Now, for bands, composing new music and staying relevant is always a challenge. Usually, from your previous records or even from this record, how do you yourself go about to, either compose a new song lyrically or to kind of take My Dying Bride to the next level?
Well, on this album, it was completely different because obviously the writing process was happening while I was in hospital.
Yeah.
So I didn't get involved in the actual music. And I didn't get involved in the album until the rest of the guys had almost finished recording the album. And, it was crunch time. Even though Nuclear Blast never gave us a deadline, they just said it's ready when it's ready. I still felt, I need to move on because everyone's going to start waiting for me at the moment at some point. So I went into the studio and I wrote what I thought was right, and I tried the vocals, and there was, as I say, there was a lot of rewriting and shuffling things around till we got it how it needed to be. Because you're right, with every album, you raise the bar a bit because you have to better each album. And the previous one, released 5 years ago, Feel the Misery, that got some of the greatest reviews any of our albums have ever had. So that was a whopper to beat. Whether we have or not, I can't say because I'm in the band and it's up to people who are outside the band to decide. But we needed to come back with a bit of a bang. It's our first one on Nuclear Blast. We needed to make an impact. And I think we did. We pulled out all the stops. Andrew's songwriting is as impeccable as ever. And the performances of all the band members is astonishing. And then we had Lindy Faye Heller from Wardruna joining in with the vocals. We had Jo Quayle playing her beautiful cello for us. And it all came together. The production's magnificent. And I think we delivered a stellar album for Nuclear Blast. I say think because, as I say, I've not heard it yet. I'm just going by the reviews.
Yeah.
I've heard it in fragments. It's like a jigsaw. I've heard that bit, and I've heard that bit over there, and I've heard that bit. I've not heard the entire thing as a fan has heard it.
Yeah. Well, as a fan, I can say I love the album. It's amazing, and even the new songs from the EP coming out. I mean, it's great stuff, and it's good to have My Dying Bride back, and in the scenes of giving us music to consume and kind of give us something to look forward to, especially since, of course we can't be going to concerts or anything like that. So
it's good to be able to still be in the public eye, even in such torrid times as we are living in right now. So I think the EP's come out at the perfect time. Nuclear Blast couldn't have timed that any better. Yeah. So I've been doing interviews for the album since January the 3rd, and I'm still doing them, which just goes to show the extent of promotion that Nuclear Blast have done. It's been incredible. And there's almost as much press for the EP as there was for the album, which is amazing. It's never been like that, because when you release an album, the magazines and the sort of big outlets, they almost have to review it because that's their job. Sometimes EPs can be overlooked because they're not considered to be as serious as an album. But this EP, everyone's nailing it. And it's like, the interviews are coming out of my ears, and it's absolutely insane. And coming very soon will be the official video for Macabre Cabaret. We filmed that a few weeks ago, and that should be ready by the end of this week, I hope. So that's the next thing I think people will see, because I'm sure the video is probably going to come out before the EP. Yeah. And then the EP comes out on November the 20th. And in between that, we released that bad boy, the My Dying Bride beer. That came out a couple of weeks ago, and that's going crazy as well, because I guess people, when they're not going to gigs, then they're missing spending a bit of money, because we all like to buy a T-shirt or some sort of merchandise at a gig. And so the beer actually was planned way before lockdown. The beer, we started tasting the beer back in last November, not realising there was going to be a lockdown. And it's an ideal time to release something like that. Again, it keeps people enthusiastic. It keeps the brand of My Dying Bride alive. And when people can't see us live, at least they can still nibble at bits of merchandise, which is quite a nice thing.
Right, for sure. Now, is this something that, for the Old Earth Lager, is this something that's going to be like a limited run, or it's going to continue on?
It depends how many we sell.
Yeah.
If it sells like hotcakes, the brewery will just keep on churning it out until people get sick of it.
Yeah.
The problem with it, of course, is the shipping is expensive, because each box weighs 4 kilos. So, the brewery were telling me, we have a lot of fans in Brazil. To ship the beer to Brazil, the shipping alone is $70.
Oh my God.
That's more than beer costs. So it's not very practical, which is why we are putting our feelers out and asking people if they know of a distributor in their country who'd be willing to buy a pallet load and sell it from their own country. That would make it so much easier for the locals to get hold of.
Yeah.
Or failing that, even better, finding a small brewery. We give them the ingredients, we license it to those guys, send them the artwork, and say, you produce it in your own country. That would be marvellous, because the shipping thing's not ideal. Cans are heavy. And, the company, Darkland Brewery, they'd never done cans before. Everything was traditionally done in bottles. Well, they're even heavier. So we convinced them, look, I think the majority of your orders are going to come from abroad. Can you put it in cans instead? And they'd never done it before, so they looked into it. And apparently there's a mobile canning firm who arrive, pull out this huge machine, attach your vats to it, and the cans come through, the labels are on, the beer gets filled, and it all works like clockwork, and it's brilliant. So it's all been quite a learning curve. But ideally, I love it, because, I would say that, but then we spent months tasting it and saying, right, we want more of this hops, less of that hops, and what about adding something else? And you taste it and you're like, okay, that's nice, but there's something missing. What else can we do? So we spent months getting it just right. So obviously we love it now. And it's a real nice, tasty brew. It's not too strong. It's not too weak. And we just want everyone to have a bit. But it's hard. If I send you a case, it's going to cost you a fortune.
Yeah.
So we just need someone to help us distribute it.
Yeah. Or even a thought, just as a kind of like a souvenir for a fan would just be like maybe purchasing the can itself with the autograph from the band.
Well, I suppose, we could, but see, I don't know. Do people want that? I don't know.
I would as a fan. I mean, if I had the option, if I'm going to pay say $70 for shipping on, say a case of something, as opposed to maybe I can buy a can uh, at say $10 to $20, and the shipping's going to be like $5. But it comes signed from the whole band, then that would be an interesting option that I may choose.
Yeah. Okay. We'll have a look at that. Yeah.
Yeah. Just I mean, I have ADHD, so just my brain goes in different directions.
Yeah.
As I'm talking.
We'll have a look at that, because I know someone mentioned in the past. Well, say in the past, it was last week. Obviously, you can't sell it to minors unless it's an empty can. So some people are saying, I'd buy an empty can, and obviously the shipping for that will be peanuts, because it's mostly air with a bit of tin. Yeah. So we'll have a look at it. We'll get together with the brewery, and we'll just find out what options there are.
Yeah, something interesting. One of the things that has changed, another significant thing for the band, is now, of course, like you mentioned, you are a Nuclear Blast compared to used to be on Peaceville, and it seems like it has been in your favor to where it's worked out. Like you said, you've been talking. I mean, you've been having interviews galore. Do you think this will also open up, tours? Maybe, hopefully, everybody in the States wants you to come back because it's been a while. But
it has been a while. Yeah. We believe that being on Nuclear Blast will help us get to territories we haven't been to, or have only been to very briefly, because they will maybe buddy us up with another similar kind of band on their label, and we'll travel around as a kind of package tour.
Yeah,
that would work, and we would love to do something like that. We're not so big-headed and rock-starry that we'd say, no, we don't want to tour with any other Nuclear Blast. We'll tour with anybody to get out there and play our music to the people who've spent their hard-earned cash buying it and supporting us.
Yeah.
So that was another reason for the move to Nuclear Blast. We figured they can pull a few more strings and get us into territories we might never have been able to play in the past.
Yeah, that's going to be great for fans all over once touring starts again. And
yeah.
As a band, being around, this marks 30 years. It's just a feat to be able to do that and to consistently put out music. And, every time that a new album comes out from the band, it's always like, you can almost not do a bad album, which is very hard, because sometimes there'll be some sometimes there'll be some bands and they put out something and you're like, what the hell were they thinking, or anything like that. But My Dying Bride has been one to where, I mean, all the albums are amazing. Now, if you would look back on your career, what would you say would be some of your, one of the proudest moments as a musician spanning these 30 years?
Well, when we released The Angel and the Dark River, unbeknown to us, Steve Harris from Iron Maiden thought it was really rather a good album. So he contacted us, and we ended up touring with Iron Maiden for 6 weeks all over Europe. That was awesome, because we played on their soccer team, and we scored goals, and it was a fabulous time, And then I think we got offered a tour of North America with Ronnie James Dio, and again, that was awesome. He was a hero of ours, and to have him in our dressing room drinking our beer that he supplied was just an awesome time. You almost pinch yourself to see if it's real.
Yeah.
Iron Maiden and Dio are legendary, they're absolutely legendary in rock. To be playing with those guys was amazing. And a similar occasion, we got invited by Metallica to Athens in Greece, and we played this huge outdoor mountain range. And, we met them backstage, and they signed all our stuff, and it was great. And when we're on stage halfway through the set, I glanced across the stage, and James is there, and Kirk's there, and Lars is there watching, and, you think, this is crazy. This is just insane. So we've had some major moments, and, we've never had a manager. Myself and Andrew have always managed the band, so we've nailed these things ourselves.
Yeah.
We haven't paid someone a fortune to go and do it for us. Everything that happens regarding My Dying Bride has been signed off by either me or Andrew. It's no one else gets involved. The beer was something we took up ourselves. No one helped us, just us and the brewery working something out together. I suppose if we had a manager, they might have already had a distribution set up. But yeah, that's by the by. Someone might still take us up on it. And that is, one thing after 30 years, sometimes people say, is there anything you could have changed? Is there anything you would want to have changed? Having a manager might have been one of those, because you don't know in what state My Dying Bride would be had we had a manager. They might have pulled a few more strings, and I don't know. I just don't know. But I suppose one of the problems with managers is that they want their cut of your money, and they wouldn't be happy with just doing 20 shows a year. They would want you on the road most of the year.
Right.
And that's not for us. That's just not for us, because that's like thrashing an old horse. It's just going to achieve nothing, because we would hate it. When we do our 18 to 20 shows a year, we're maxed out after that. That's all we want to do. It makes each gig super special.
Yeah.
And it means, people will flock to come and see us, because they're very much aware of the fact that we might not be back for a decade.
Right.
So they come and see us, and if you tour all the time, what will happen when you play New York City in January, and then in March, and then sometime in the summertime, and then sometime in autumn, when you keep doing that, people will start to check what's on TV first. Their friends will say, hey, you're coming to see My Dying Bride tomorrow night. And they'll say, let me just see what's on TV. Because they know if they miss the gig, we'll be back.
Right.
And we don't want that happening with My Dying Bride. We want people to say, are you coming to see My Dying Bride? And everyone says, hell yeah!
Yeah.
Because they're not coming back. You know how rare these gigs are.
Right.
So I think it's wise that we didn't have a manager, because he would have pushed us into places and events and song editing that we probably wouldn't have liked. So we have complete artistic freedom.
Yeah.
And I think that's the best way to be. That's why we've lasted 30 years. No one's told us what to do.
Yeah.
We've done it ourselves. And when you do it yourselves and have total freedom, why stop doing it?
Right. Well, I mean, yeah, and the proof is in the pudding. I mean, here you are 30 years later going strong, and more likely because you've had complete, total creativity to be able to do what you wanted and how you wanted to.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes, when you're doing the more technical side of things, working out taxes and all that dull stuff, it does take the shine off the creativity aspect. But then when you have such gaps between albums, it allows you to get all that tech stuff done, the boring stuff, and it frees up the time to do the good creative stuff. So that's why there's quite often gaps between the albums of a certain length, because we've got technical boring stuff as well as lives to live.
Right.
The good ship My Dying Bride won't float all by itself. Someone's got to steer it in the right direction.
Right, for sure. Now, one thing that you did mention, you were talking about how some bands will just play nonstop, and you're right. After a while, nobody wants to go see them because they're like, they'll just be back the next year. But not only, that part, but also as a musician, from what I've heard, when you're playing 100 and something shows a year, you are just worn out. To where it's hard to put your all in every show night after night.
It's impossible, and if people say they do, then they're lying, because we've seen bands who are tired on stage, and you've seen them all. Have a sneaky look at their watch halfway through the gig, and they're waiting for it to be over, and that's not heavy metal. That's not rock and roll.
Right.
That's become their day job. Okay, there are worse day jobs, but they don't know what town they're in. They don't know what country they're in. They don't know what time zone they're in. They don't care. Yeah. They're just going through the motions, waiting for it to finish, watching that set list get lower and lower and lower. And at the encore, they probably go off, without any excitement. Do you know what I mean? They'd probably go off and think, oh, God, we've got to go on and do three more songs.
Right.
Even though the crowd might be shouting, we want more, we want more. The band will trudge back on stage, do three more songs, and then walk off, and it's over. And, they'll get back on the tour bus, and there'll be no high-fiving, no celebrating, no chit-chat about, who played that wrong, and who came in too early, and, wow, did you see that girl on the front row? There'll be none of that, because it's the same old shit every day.
Yeah. And that's
we'll never be like that.
Yeah, good. Now, talking about as a band, of course, it's labeled as a doom genre, but also with your lyrics, for the history of the band, have been very dark, poetic in nature. Is this something that comes easy for you to write, or is it something that fits the music and that's why you aim that way?
No, well, it was tricky in the early days, but I've been doing it for a long time now. It's relatively easy for me now because as a kid at school, I loved poetry. When we did English literature at school, I ate this stuff up. Most kids were like, oh, it's so dull. Who cares about Shakespeare? No, he's a dead poet. No one cares anymore. I lapped it up. I thought it was fascinating and brilliant. And when we formed My Dying Bride, because I couldn't play an instrument, I was obviously going to be the vocalist. And I realised that's a great outlet for my lyrics here. And so I just started writing, and it was fairly easy. And I've sort of honed it over the years into more of a personal style, because the early stuff was very much influenced by Byron and Keats and all those old boys. But over time, I think I've developed my own style now. But I still read loads, and the stuff that I read is obviously going to influence the way that I write. But for me now, writing is a pleasure. It's not something I sort of put off and delay until I really have to. I take my daughter to school, and then just next to the school is a tea room, and I go and sit there for a couple of hours, have a coffee or three, and just write. And it's amazing, because the words are always rattling around in my head. And that's annoying. So I need to write them down, or they'll drive me insane.
Yeah.
So I write as much as I possibly can. And sometimes the words turn into lyrics for My Dying Bride, and sometimes just poems. So, I'm gathering them all together. I've got books like this all over the house. They've got page after page after page of text, which I've written, and now I'm going through the laborious task of digitizing them so that I can approach someone, a publisher or something in the future, and release a book.
Yeah, and that was going to be my follow-up question. If you were looking towards whether a book, short story, maybe even like a limited edition My Dying Bride comic based on some of your characters from your songs.
That would be interesting. Yeah, that would be very interesting. I wish I was a good illustrator as well. I cannot draw. My daughter can draw way better than me. My drawing is horrendous, which is a shame, because sometimes when I write the poems, I can visualize an image that would represent the words perfectly. But I just don't have the ability to do that. I can paint abstracts, and I'm quite good at Photoshop, but I just love to be able to pick up a pen and just illustrate something on a piece of paper. It'd be great. And I know a few people who can. So there are some funny little poems that I've done where the character of Death is always having accidents and things like that, and amusing things are always happening to Death.
Yeah.
Even on his day off. And I just wanted someone to be able to come up with a little caricature that would support each little bit of text. In fact, I know Hamish, our old guitar player, is quite a good illustrator. I might give him a ring.
Yeah, that would be cool. That would be an interesting avenue, and just to see where it would go.
Yeah, I might do something like that.
Yeah. So, one of the things, you have diehard fans that have been following you for decades. I'm sure over the years, some fans have told you, your music means this to me, or it saved me during this dark period of time. So for yourself as a musician, somebody's telling you that. How? What are your thoughts on how the music has affected fans?
Yeah, we even back before the internet, we received handwritten letters from people from as far afield as Poland, expressing how My Dying Bride, and this is incredible, saved them from suicide. And I find that mind blowing. And we've had this for years, and it's not like our music is super uplifting. And indeed, people who aren't familiar with rock music or this style of extreme metal, I suppose you could call it to outsiders, when they hear it, their initial reaction is, oh my God, that's awful, dreadful, miserable music. Why would anyone listen to that? It would send them to suicide. It doesn't have that effect. It has the opposite effect. It somehow fills people with the information of life. There's something in there. There's light in those shadows. And sometimes it's easy to find, and sometimes you've got to read between the lines and really look for it if you want to. And our fans want to read between the lines. They want to look to see what's in the shadows. And that's amazing for us. And at no point have I ever tried to write a sort of track that is written on purpose to almost reach out to people, because I think it would be so cliched, it would be so obvious, and it would be almost so, I don't know, rude that people would slap it away and say, no, you don't need to, you're already doing that.
Yeah.
Don't do the cheesy version. So, yeah, it's amazing and it's astonishing, and it's wonderful to hear news that people have found great help in My Dying Bride's music and the things that we do, and it's amazing. And I try not to let it ever affect the way I write, because sometimes when you're writing and you can feel it getting darker and darker and darker, at no point do you think, oh, hang on a minute, what if this does drive someone over the edge? You can't self-edit that way. You have to write how you feel, or there's no point writing. So the fan stuff goes out the window when I'm writing, because I have to write for myself. I can't write for other people. And if it's going down a dark hole, then we all go down with it.
Yeah. And I think it's also, as a fan, I think it's also something to where when an artist is able to put certain feelings or thoughts in through music and through lyrics, it's almost like we're not alone in how we're feeling.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah.
Well, same thing happens to me when, in the old days, when I'd listen to a band like Dead Can Dance, whose music is super melancholic. And you would initially think, well, if you listen to a CD of theirs, why would you bother getting out of bed the next morning? There's no point. It has the opposite effect.
Yeah.
I leap out of bed the next day. I am full of beans, full of life. Bring on the next day. It's just the way the body works sometimes. I mean, it's not going to work for everybody. But for me, it does. Listening to Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds and some of their most melancholic tracks, when the song finishes, I just feel enlightened somehow. And I think that's what some people feel when our songs finish.
Yeah. I think there's been a couple of studies that have done studies on metal music to where people actually feel better. And there's scientific data that shows that we feel better after we listen to, metal music or rock music, which...
It would be funny if My Dying Bride's music was subscribed by certain practices,
Right.
which may or may not alleviate someone's depression. I don't know. It'd be great if it was. Somewhere in the world, you never know.
Yeah, I'm sure. Just like you said, you've had people write to you and says that My Dying Bride has saved me. So, I mean, there's proof that it is working, and it does help on numerous different levels. So,
Yeah, it can do.
yeah. So, one of the exciting things that hopefully is still happening is, are you still having the show on the 14th in Athens? Is that still on?
No.
Oh no, that's terrible.
Yeah, no. I don't know when our next gig is supposed to be. There was a chance in the summertime. We were thinking maybe we still can play Eindhoven in Holland, because that's something like into December.
Yes.
But that got cancelled ages ago.
Really?
Well, they're not cancelled. They're just postponed till next year. So there's absolutely nothing happening this year. And it looks like the first part of 2021 is going to be fairly bereft of live performances as well. So I suspect, I might upset some promoters who are hopeful for gigs. I suspect we're not going to play live till late summer next year.
Yes.
But let's hope it's before then.
Yeah, hopefully. Yeah, we can always at least have some kind of hope.
You need some hope in life, don't you?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that was the other question. You did have a show coming up in the Netherlands in December. I have seen some shows pop up in Europe every now and then with limited capacity, of course, for the venues. But it's going to be a while before we get back to some kind of normalcy, for sure.
Yeah, it will be. But, these online gigs that some bands are doing at the moment, we sort of considered doing one of those, but I don't relish the thought of walking onto a stage in an empty venue, because what propels me to do the things I do on stage is that nervous fear that, even after 30 years, is always with me before I go on stage. Without that, knowing there's just cameras in the room, the performance surely is going to be very different from when you're playing in front of 10,000 people. So I think what we might try and do it in a venue, and let's say the capacity of the venue is 500 people. Can we get 100 in? And maybe mark out the floor. I know it's not the same, because gigs, you want to be elbowing everyone and loving it and, all in the same boat, all
Right.
brothers and sisters together. But what that would mean, it would mean 100 people get to see us live, and I still get that nervous anxiety about performing live because there's 100 people there, as well as the cameras. So we might look at something like that.
Yeah. And that's interesting that you still get nervous
Oh,
performing.
God. It's never left. It's never left.
But even so, there has to be, after the performance is over, there has to be some kind of relief once you're done with the show.
Oh yeah, it's massive relief for me. It's a physical and a mental relief, because it's so intense. Live performances are so intense, because I have to become the characters I've written about, and more often than not, they're going through some dark predicament, and so I have to feel that, and I have to act it in a way. Otherwise, it's unbelievable. People will just think he's just making this stuff up. But I really feel for these people, and so I have to become them. And on stage, I'm a completely different person. That half an hour before we go on stage, I can feel my body changing and my mind, and everybody knows it. They stop talking to me in the dressing room because they realise he's heading down that road.
Yeah.
And when we go on stage, honest to God, my hands are like this. I'm ready to be sick. It's a fucking nightmare. And then when I don't know, I must look like John Wayne when I walk out on stage. My knees are going and I can't stand up. I'm so nervous. But then I'm in that zone, and I'm living the characters I've created, and it's painful, and I'm all over the place. I'm crying, and I don't know where I get up from the floor, and I'm facing the wrong way, and it's just who I am and how I perform. It's I'd love to just walk out in jeans and a t-shirt and say, "Let's fucking rock," and just enjoy the show, and get half the audience to go way and the other half to go whoa, and it's just love being on stage. But it's an absolute dread, and this is another reason we only do a small amount of shows per year, because it's so draining. And people laugh about this, but it's absolutely true. My favourite part of being on stage is when I say good night, because I can feel this huge black burden that's been sat on my shoulders for the whole performance. I can feel it lifting off, and I leave the stage hunched over slightly because I'm exhausted. And when I get to the dressing room, I don't talk to anybody and they don't talk to me. And it takes half an hour, 40 minutes for me to come back down to the real Aaron Stainthorpe and not this weird entity on stage. And so, and the band have known this over the years. They don't, it's not like, they poke fun at me because I'm sat in a corner with a towel on my head. They understand what's been going on. And, they kind of live it with me for a little bit, but it doesn't affect them in such a way. They can perform their awesome pieces while looking at the audience and down that girl's top. They say things like that, after, wow, did you see those girls in the front row? And I did not see a thing. I look across the crowd because if you make eye contact with someone, that feels like an attempt to shatter the moment that I'm in, and I can't allow that to happen.
Yeah, it's very. I mean, not only the music, but the lyric contents. I mean, throwing yourself in a performance, that's a lot that you go through. Which, if somebody from the outside would look at My Dying Bride, they would think of you as a major depressant. Which, I mean, speaking to you, obviously you're not, having a good time. It's very different, and I guess from people from the outside don't understand that. To where you go to a concert, like a My Dying Bride concert, or any other type of doom metal, to where a lot of the music is dark, it's very poetic, the dark side of human beings, to where afterwards you feel better,
Definitely. When I'm not in the coffee room writing my poetry, when it comes to lyrics, I write them late at night, and I have a couple of glasses of wine, and you sort of wait till you get into this sort of dark melancholy, and you can feel the words coming, and you start writing them. And so, as I mentioned before, sometimes they become the lyrics for My Dying Bride, and sometimes they're used for something else later on. And when they are the lyrics for My Dying Bride, when I come to sing them on stage, I remember the moment when I wrote them, and it was a horrible time for me, because I only write those kinds of lyrics when I can feel the shadows closing in. It starts to get dark around the corner of your eyes, and there's a part of your brain that is locked up during your waking hours, but there are certain times, if you're not sure lucky is the right word, but if you're lucky enough, if you can capture that right moment, there's a small crack somewhere in your subconscious, and the thoughts that are suppressed throughout the day start to make their way through to the front of your brain, and you capture them. And it's like fishing. You've got to capture them and get them out of your head quick, because if they stay there, you'll go mental. You'll go absolutely insane. So you capture them, and once you've captured them and they're there on the paper, they're no longer right in here. And so if they're not in my brain, I've caught them on the paper. Makes me feel good.
Yeah. One of the things that I was reading, there are some songs that you completely avoid singing live because of the state that you're in at that point, and knowing that how much you're putting your body through and your mind through as you're singing. I can completely understand why you would avoid some of those songs to play live.
Yeah, I don't know how. Oh God. Eric Clapton, he lost his son, and he wrote that song about him. I don't know how he performs that live.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know how he holds it together to be able to perform that live. Obviously, he's a professional. He's been doing it for years. He's a wonderful musician. But something so personal, I just refuse to sing it.
Right. And I can understand in a certain sense. I work as a first responder, and so some of the emergency calls, I mean, of course, dealing with kids, I'm like, I have trouble speaking about them. So, I mean, I completely understand. There's some things that you just don't want to revisit. And then, unfortunately, some of the fans may not understand that. They're like, you have to play this song live. And you're like, and they don't understand. It's like, I can't play that live.
Yeah. I think we've been going long enough for people to understand that now. You rarely hear someone shouting for a song we're never going to play. They're normally shouting for the ones that they know we probably are going to play.
Right. Very good. So we're almost kind of concluding our interview. We've been able to talk a lot, and I really appreciate your time as a fan. I mean, I've been following since '95. I've been following y'all since that time. Since The Angel and the Dark River was my first album. That was like a nonstop. That was in my cassette player at the time.
Awesome.
Yeah. So, other than, of course, pre-ordering, the press release, which you said the initial one sold out, and they're going to make some new pressings for Macabre Cabaret. Anything else that you would like to promote for the band? And, of course, picking up that Lager, even though you got to spend, a little bit of money for the shipping, you still got to do it.
Yeah, the beer's great. I've got one here. I'll probably pop that open when I've finished this. I've got more interviews to do tonight. No, I think we've done a good thing. We've pushed everything we needed to push. So I appreciate your time. Thank you very much. I don't need to flog myself further.
All right. Well, Aaron, thank you very much. It was an honor to be able to talk to you, and I hope to get to see the band live. One day, one of those 12 shows that you played throughout the year.
Yeah, you will. You will. We'll be stretching our legs a bit further in the future.
Excellent. Well, thank you. Have a great day and enjoy the rest of your evening.
Cool. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Cheers,
Bye.
mate. Bye-bye.
Bye.